Okay, environmental. Hard as it may seem, yes, there are environmental benefits to using cannabis. Probably the most important one at the moment is biofuel. Cannabis produces or can be used to produce an environmentally sound biofuel that can pretty much eliminate our dependency on oil almost overnight. The problem here lies with big business. You know, the largest market in the world at the moment is oil. It's worth billions of pounds a year, I mean hundreds of billions of pounds a year. Now, the amount of tax that the government puts on fuel is, I think, 68-70% is the tax levied on fuel. So the amount of money that the government earns from the tax of fuel, and also the possible donations from big oil companies and so on and so forth, make it very difficult for the government to say, yeah, let's get rid of oil and we'll use biofuels made from cannabis instead. They don't want to do it. They lose too much money. They lose too much power. They'd have to admit that they were lying, amongst other things. They don't want to do that at the moment with the expenses scandal and everything else. You know, it's not, honesty is not high on their list of priorities. Biofuel is one environmental bonus to come out of cannabis. I mean, the other obvious one is, if you can imagine fields and fields and fields of cannabis, not only in this country but in third world countries as well, how much extra oxygen is that going to produce for the planet? Okay, it's going to produce a hell of a lot more oxygen. The rate that we're cutting down trees to provide us with paper and everything else is just criminal. And then it can take hundreds or thousands of years for these rainforests or forests to, recover from the damage that we cause them, if they can recover. You can crop, I think the statement is that an acre of cannabis will produce 3 times as much paper as an acre of trees, and it's better quality paper. And you can grow 3 or 4 crops in 1 year that you can harvest to turn into paper. Why are we cutting down trees when we can use cannabis to make paper, and it's completely it's environmentally sound? It's almost a limitless reusable resource. It doesn't make any sense. The only reason that this isn't happening at the moment, again, is because the government doesn't want it legalised, because it would A, have to admit that it was lying, and B, give in to the lobbying power of big business. Now, like I said, I can't be the only person that thinks that this is wrong, that we're doing this, we're allowing the government to do this completely arse about face. I mean, if somebody can see some sense in this, please let me know, because I can't. Okay, I mean, that's just 2 of the environmental issues that you can combat using cannabis. Not to mention, there's been over 5,000 different textile products can be made from its fibre. It's the strongest natural fibre known to man. It's stronger than cotton. I believe it's also safer to harvest than cotton. So why aren't we using it? You can create over 25,000 different other products from its cellulose, ranging from cellophane to dynamite, paper to petrol. So why aren't we using it? Again, the answer comes back to the government not wanting to admit that it was wrong. Yes, the government would lose vast amounts of revenue from these companies, the pharmaceutical companies and the oil companies, if it was to legalise, regulate and use cannabis. But the amount of money it can gain in revenue by the sale and taxation of cannabis is, again, astronomical. So the only reason that we're not making use of it is because people like Gordon Brown do not want to admit that they were wrong. They don't want to admit that they were lying, because they'll lose votes, and more importantly, they will lose the power. Okay, it's pretty much the money and the power that drives them. And if you think that the government doesn't lie to you, Iraq. Okay, do I need to say any more? Okay then, MPs' expenses, the scandal with that. How many times have you seen these MPs lying on the television? I don't believe I did anything wrong. Sorry mate, you claimed for your moat to be cleaned. Okay, and you're telling us you did nothing wrong. Stop lying. Come on, we want the truth. Okay, that's all it is, the truth. If you're not man enough to admit it, then get somebody in who is, and let's start making this world a better place for everybody that's in it, not just for the people who are in charge. Well, there's no doubt that cannabis use does affect the crime rate, just simply because you have to be a criminal to use it or supply it. I'm a cannabis user, therefore I'm a criminal. And it really is that simple. What we have to move away from is the stereotyped image of a cannabis user, or a drugs user in particular. Not every drug user is the wasteoid that you see portrayed by the government and the media at every single available opportunity. The vast majority of cannabis users and drug users as a whole are normal, everyday people that don't have any problems with it whatsoever. They do it quietly, privately, and you never know that they take drugs. If you need something extra to help me prove the point, if you use alcohol, then you are somebody who is in the town centres on a Friday and Saturday night, smashing up the all the shops, fighting, causing problems for the police, the other emergency services, the accident emergency teams at the local hospital. Then you're one of those people, just because you take alcohol. It's the same principle. You and I know that the vast majority of alcohol users are everyday normal people that don't misuse it in any way. They get home from work, a hard day at work, and they have a quiet drink to relax, or they go out for a social drink at the weekend with friends without having to go into the town centre and smash the place up. That's a typical alcohol user, somebody who uses it responsibly. The typical drugs user is exactly the same, especially your typical cannabis user. They're not out in town smashing everything up. They're at home quietly minding their own business, not causing any trouble to anybody. So we need to move away from that. You do get a level of crime and violence associated with cannabis, and where that kicks in is when you get to the supply and control area of the cannabis market. General users, you won't find a violent one anyway. I've yet to hear of a story where somebody went out to see a friend, smoked a couple of reefers, come home and beat his wife and the kids as a direct result of taking cannabis. It doesn't happen. Can you say the same thing about alcohol? Now again, not every alcohol user is like that, the same way not every drugs user comes home and beats their kids. So, like I said, we need to move away from that. But you do get an element of crime when you start getting into the upper echelons of the drugs market. Now, using cannabis in particular, the only time you're really going to find any violence is when you're dealing with suppliers. Okay, they have an investment to protect, an illegal investment, but an investment nonetheless. And they know if they're found out, the government's coming in with guns and the whole works. They're coming to get them. So they defend in the same way. So that's where you get the crime and violence associated with cannabis. At the general street level, from the users, there's not a problem. It's the criminal and terrorist organisations that control the market that create the violence. Yes, with some of the other drugs like heroin and cocaine, you do get that element of violence and crime from the users, as not as a whole, but some of them, the minority. And the reason for that is there's no control over the market. The government doesn't control it, the dealers control it. And the dealers aren't interested in whether or not one of their customers is taking things a bit far, getting a bit too hooked. You'll never hear a dealer say, sorry mate, I'm not selling it to you because I think you're taking it too far. It's, you got the money? Right, there's your drugs. They don't care. They will tick or give users drugs on credit. They run up a bill that they can't afford to pay back without resorting to crime. And these people aren't threatened with, we'll take you to court, we'll call the police, obviously. What they're threatened with, we'll take your kneecaps, we'll rape your wife, we'll kill your children until you pay us the money back. So these people are then forced to go to commit acts of violence and crime in order to pay off that debt or support something they're addicted to. If these drugs were legalised, and yeah, I know that's a big thing to ask, but if cannabis was legalised, you wouldn't notice too much of a difference, in all honesty, apart from more money going to the government. If you legalise the other drugs, and this is a big leap of faith, you remove most of that problem. You introduce an element of control where people who are users can be monitored to ensure that they're not taking too much. The same way that we issue health and safety about alcohol and tobacco, printed on the packets and everything else. Recommended maximum dosages, what to look for if you know that a friend's having problems. We can treat this in an adult and grown-up manner and eliminate the crime and violence element to it completely. The crime and violence element to cannabis or any drugs use is caused by prohibition. If you take a more adult, a more sensible approach to it, you can wipe it out pretty much overnight.